At my husband's funeral, my phone buzzed, and the message on the screen made my knees go weak. I am still alive. Trust no one. I remember that exact moment as if it stitched into my bones. The church smelled of lilies and polished wood, the kind of scent that clings to grief. A soft hymn floated through the air, echoing off the stone walls. Everyone around me was dressed in black, faces blurred by tears and whispers. But when that message flashed across my screen, the world tilted. My breath hitched. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped the phone. My husband, Daniel, was lying in the coffin just a few feet away still, pale, dressed in his favorite navy suit. I had kissed that cold forehead only an hour earlier. I had watched them close the lid. Yet there it was, his name, his number, and the message, I'm still alive, trust no one. I remember gripping the pew to steady myself, the wood biting into my palm. My sister Claire leaned over and whispered, "Are you all right?" I nodded, even though the air felt too thin to breathe. I slid my phone into my clutch and forced myself to stand when the pastor called me forward to speak. My voice was supposed to carry love, farewell, and faith. Instead, every word felt like ash, because how do you say goodbye to someone who might not be gone? If you had met me 6 months before that day, you'd have thought I had the perfect life. Daniel and I had been married for 22 years. We met when I was a nurse at St. Agnes Hospital, and he was an ambitious contractor working on the new wing. He had this easy smile, the kind that disarmed you before you could even finish a thought. We built our life slowly, brick by brick, a modest house on Cedar Lane. 2 children, Sophie and Matthew, both grown now. Daniel started his own construction business, and I shifted to part-time nursing so I could be home more. We weren't rich, but we had warmth. And that warmth meant everything to me. Daniel had always been steady, not loud, not the kind to make grand gestures, but dependable. He made coffee every morning at 6:30 sharp. He left notes on the fridge when he had early meetings. He mowed the lawn on Saturdays and fixed the squeaky gate every spring. Our rhythm was quiet but comforting, until, slowly, that rhythm began to change. It started with the late nights. Client calls ran long, he'd say. "Just tired, honey." Then came the distant looks, the small hesitations before answering questions, the half smile that didn't reach his eyes anymore. I tried not to pry. After 20 years of marriage, you learn to trust more than you question. I thought maybe he was just stressed about work. The economy had been hard on small businesses. But then, one night, I woke up and found his side of the bed empty. It was 2:47 a.m. I went downstairs, expecting to find him watching TV or working in his office. Instead, I found the front door slightly open. When he came back 20 minutes later, he froze at the sight of me. "Couldn't sleep," he said, forcing a smile. "Went for a walk." In his hand was a small envelope. When I asked what it was, he said, "Just some papers for work." Something inside me shifted that night, a tiny, cold seed of doubt that I tried to bury. 2 weeks later, everything ended. Daniel didn't come home one evening. I called his phone straight to voicemail. At first, I thought maybe he was with a client. But when hours passed, I started calling hospitals. At midnight, there was a knock on the door. 2 police officers stood there, their hats in their hands. "Mrs. Turner," one of them said, voice low, "there's been an accident. They told me his car had gone off the highway near Ridgewood Bridge. The vehicle had exploded upon impact. The body inside was burned beyond recognition, but they found his watch, the one I gave him for our anniversary, and his wallet. Just like that, he was gone." The following days were a blur of condolences, casseroles, and paperwork. Sophie flew in from Chicago, her eyes swollen from crying. Matthew tried to be strong, organizing the funeral arrangements. Everyone said the same thing: he was such a good man. And he was, at least I believed he was. So when that text came during his funeral, something inside me snapped. My first instinct was denial. Maybe someone hacked his phone. Maybe it was some cruel joke. But the message, it wasn't random. Trust no one. Why would someone say that? Why now? I excused myself quietly, stepping out into the hallway. My hands shook as I unlocked the phone again. The message was still there, sitting like a shadow on the screen. I tried to call the number, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the dial tone, but it went straight to voicemail. The same old recording. "This is Daniel Turner. Leave a message." My throat tightened. I whispered, "Daniel, if this is some kind of please, just tell me where you are." But there was only silence. When I turned around, I saw my son standing at the end of the hallway. "Mom, are you okay?" Matthew asked, his voice careful. I slipped the phone into my clutch again and forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, just needed a moment." But as I looked at his face, something strange stirred inside me, an unease I couldn't name, because for the first time I noticed the way he avoided my eyes, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, Daniel's message wasn't a lie. Maybe I really shouldn't trust anyone. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house smelled faintly of wax from the memorial candles, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The room was too quiet. The clock on the wall ticked like it was keeping time only for me. Daniel's phone sat beside mine. The police had returned it after the accident. Charred around the edges but still functional. They'd said it had been found near the wreck. I hadn't dared turn it on until that night. When I did, the screen flickered to life, and a photo of us from last summer filled it. We were laughing at the lake, sunlight glinting off the water. It was strange. That moment captured joy staring back at me while my stomach twisted in fear. I checked the messages. Nothing new. No mysterious texts, no unknown numbers. Just the familiar exchanges, notes about groceries, reminders to pay the electric bill. But my phone still held that one impossible message, sent just 2 hours earlier, from this same number. I stared at it again. "I'm still alive. Trust no one." A part of me wanted to delete it to pretend it had never appeared, but I couldn't. Instead, I took a screenshot, printed it, and tucked it inside my Bible. Somehow that made it real enough to hold, but hidden enough to protect. The next morning, Claire came over with muffins and that forced brightness people wear when they don't know how to comfort you. "You need to eat something," she said, setting the basket down. "Sophie told me you barely touched dinner last night." "I'm fine," I murmured, but I wasn't. My mind was a blur of images: Daniel's phone, the wreckage, that message. Claire poured coffee, her movements deliberate. "You've always been the strong one, you know that," she said. "But even strong people break sometimes." I nodded, but something about her tone, the way she looked at me too long, made me uneasy. That evening, after she left, I noticed something else. The envelope I'd seen in Daniel's hand the night he disappeared, the one he said was just papers for work, was missing from his office drawer. I knew because I'd checked that drawer the day after the accident, looking for insurance documents. Back then, it had been there sealed, unmarked. Now, it was gone. 3 days later, I got a call from an insurance representative named Evelyn. "Mrs. Turner," she began, polite and rehearsed. "We're processing your husband's claim, but there's an issue we need clarification on." I frowned. "An issue?" "Yes, it seems there was a recent change in his beneficiary details." My grip on the phone tightened. "Change? What do you mean?" She cleared her throat. 2 weeks before the accident, your husband and updated his file. The primary beneficiary is listed as a Ms. Claire Bennett. I froze. "Claire, my sister, are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, ma'am." Dated and signed electronically. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in silence. My pulse was roaring in my ears. Claire? Why would he name her? At first, I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe Daniel mixed up the paperwork, or maybe the insurance company did. But deep down, something heavy settled in my chest. Daniel's words echoed in my mind: trust no one. When Claire stopped by the next day, I watched her differently. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before: the new gold bracelet on her wrist, the way she averted her eyes whenever Daniel's name came up. I went through some of Daniel's old files, I said casually, watching her face. "You remember that envelope he kept in the office drawer?" Her hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "Envelope?" "Yes," I said, meeting her gaze. "White, plain. He said it was work-related." She blinked, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, right, I think I remember seeing it once." But her fingers trembled just slightly as she took a sip. That was the moment I decided to stop sharing my thoughts out loud. If Daniel wanted me to trust no one, I wouldn't. That evening, my daughter called from Chicago. "Mom, you sound off," Sophie said. "Are you sleeping at all?" I hesitated. "Just tired, sweetheart." "Listen," she said softly. "I know how hard this is, but if you need help with the paperwork or anything, I can come stay for a while." I almost said yes. I wanted her there, her warmth, her calm logic. But something held me back. I didn't know who to trust anymore. So instead I said, "No, darling, you focus on work. I'll be fine." When we hung up, guilt washed over me. Sophie didn't deserve my silence, but until I knew the truth, I couldn't drag her into this storm. That night, I went through Daniel's laptop, the one he always guarded like a secret. The password was easy, my birthday, typical of him. Most of the files were business-related invoices, blueprints, client records. But then I found a folder buried inside another, labeled Old Taxes. Inside were scans of bank statements, not ours. A different account entirely, under the name Turner Damawand Company Holdings. The balances were shocking large deposits, some from foreign clients I'd never heard of, transfers to accounts in Claire's name. I leaned back, the air catching in my throat. Claire and Daniel, together in some kind of financial web? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there on the screen. I printed the statements, tucked them with the screenshot of Daniel's message, and locked both inside my jewelry box. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a whisper. Every car that passed outside made me flinch. At 2 a.m., I heard the sound of a door closing softly downstairs. I froze. When I crept to the landing, I saw the faint glow of a flashlight in Daniel's office moving, slow and careful. Someone was inside. I held my breath, my fingers gripping the banister. Then the beam shifted, and for just a second, it landed on a face I knew all too well. Claire. She was standing by Daniel's desk, opening drawers, her expression sharp and desperate. And when her eyes met mine in the dim light, she whispered, "You weren't supposed to see this." "Claire," I whispered, my voice trembling, "what are you doing?" For a moment she just stood there, the flashlight shaking slightly in her hand. Her face looked pale and strained, the kind of expression people wear when they've already crossed too many lines to turn back. "2 was just looking for something," she stammered. "At 2 in the morning?" I stepped closer, my heartbeat loud in my ears. What could possibly be so important? She hesitated, glancing toward the drawer she'd been rummaging through. Then she sighed a long, defeated sound and turned off the flashlight. "Fine," she said, her voice dropping. "You might as well know." "We stew." Dee there in the moonlight filtering through the window. Claire's eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled. "Daniel and I... we were working on something together," she began. "An investment. It wasn't supposed to involve you." My stomach turned. "An investment? You mean those transfers I found? To your name?" Her expression faltered. "You went through his files?" "I had to," I said sharply. "He's dead, Claire, or at least I thought he was until I got that message." Her head snapped up. "What message?" I hesitated, realizing I'd just revealed something I hadn't meant to. Nothing. Just something strange. She studied me carefully, then took a step closer. "What did you see?" The air between us felt charged, heavy. "A text," I said finally, "from Daniel's number. It said, 'I'm still alive. Trust no one.'" For a heartbeat, her face went completely still. Then she laughed, soft, nervous, too high-pitched. "Oh, come on, that's impossible. I saw it with my own eyes," I said. "Then someone's playing a cruel joke," she muttered, running a hand through her hair. "Daniel's gone, Julia. You need to accept that." I stared at her. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Her jaw tightened. "You're grieving. You're confused. You shouldn't. Don't," I cut her off. "Don't talk to me like I'm fragile. I know what I saw. And I know Daniel changed his insurance beneficiary to you 2 weeks before he died. You care to explain that?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, the mask slipped guilt flickered across her face like lightning. Finally, she whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." The world seemed to narrow to that single sentence. "What wasn't supposed to happen?" I demanded. She sank onto Daniel's chair, head in her hands. "He told me he was leaving you," she said quietly, "that he couldn't keep up the lie anymore. We were going to start over somewhere else. He just needed to clean things up first." My throat went dry. "You're lying. I wish I was." Her voice cracked. "But it's true. We were together for almost a year." My knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the desk to keep myself upright. My husband, my sister. "I didn't plan it," she said quickly. "It just happened. He said your marriage was over in everything but name, that you'd grown apart." I stared at her, numb. The walls felt like they were closing in. "How could you?" I whispered. Tears welled in her eyes. "I loved him, Julia. I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did," I said coldly. "You both did." She reached out as if to touch my hand, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear the sight of her, the sound of her voice. Then another thought hit me sharp and terrifying. "Did you have something to do with his death?" Her eyes widened. "What? No! God, no! He said he'd handle things. The night of the crash, he texted me that he was driving out to meet someone, then nothing. When the police said he died, I thought you thought it was convenient," I snapped. "Insurance money. No more secrets." She shook her head, tears streaming now. "Julia, please." I swear I didn't, but I couldn't listen. My chest felt too tight, my mind spinning. Without another word, I turned and left the room. For 2 days, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me startle awake. Claire didn't come back, but she left me a message. "We need to talk. It's not what you think." I didn't respond. Instead, I went through Daniel's things again, every drawer, every folder, every file. And that's when I found it. Hidden inside the lining of his briefcase was a small flash drive. No label, just a faint fingerprint smudge across the metal. I plugged it into the laptop. Inside were recordings, audio files, dated just weeks before his accident. When I pressed play, Daniel's voice filled the room, calm, measured, but heavy with tension. "If you're hearing this, something's gone wrong. I can't trust Claire anymore. She's been lying about the money, about who's really behind the deals. I need to disappear before they find out I know." I froze. He paused on the recording, then continued. "Julia, if you ever hear this, I'm sorry. I did love you, but I made a mistake trusting the wrong person. Don't tell anyone you found this. Trust no one." My hands shook so violently I had to set the laptop down. He was alive when he recorded this. He knew something was coming, and somehow Claire was part of it. That evening, headlights flashed outside the window. My stomach dropped when I saw Claire's car in the driveway. I didn't answer when she knocked, but she didn't leave. "Julia," she called softly through the door, "please, I know you hate me, I know I deserve it, but you need to hear me out." I stayed silent. After a moment she sighed. "He's not who you think he was. Daniel was involved in something dangerous. If he's still alive, you need to be careful." Her words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" I asked, through the door. She hesitated. "He was laundering money for someone. Big money. He told me he couldn't get out. That's why he wanted to fake." She stopped herself. I yanked open the door. "Fake what?" Her face went pale. "Nothing. Forget it." But it was too late. I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of fear, the crack in her calm. "Daniel's not dead, is he?" I whispered. She didn't answer. And that silence told me everything. After that night, I stopped thinking like a grieving widow. I started thinking like someone being hunted. If Daniel really had faked his death or someone had helped him, then everything I thought I knew was a lie. And if Claire knew even part of it, she wasn't just my betrayer. She was my only link to the truth. The next morning, I packed a small bag, nothing suspicious, and told Sophie on the phone that I was taking a few days to clear my head. She offered to come home again, but I refused. I didn't want her near whatever this was. I drove to a motel an hour outside town. A forgettable place, beige curtains, buzzing neon sign, the kind of room where no one asks questions if you pay cash. From there, I opened my laptop again and replayed Daniel's recording. His voice, steady, deliberate, had always comforted me, but now it chilled me. I can't trust Claire anymore. She's been lying about who's really behind the deals. Who was behind them? I scanned the documents on that flash drive again, this time more carefully. The deposits came from shell companies' names like Cedar International and Blue Horizon Group. On the surface, they sounded legitimate, but every trace I found led to the same registered agent, Riverside Holdings, a company dissolved 3 months before Daniel's accident. That wasn't coincidence. Then I noticed something else, a series of encrypted emails in Daniel's sent folder, all addressed to someone named MK. The subject line of the most recent one read, "It's done. She believes I'm dead." My breath caught. He had sent that message just 2 days after the accident date listed in the police report. So Daniel was alive, somewhere, watching. The first place I went was the construction company office he'd rented downtown. The small space smelled of dust and stale coffee, abandoned since the police sealed it after the crash. I still had a key. Inside, everything looked normal, blueprints rolled up, binders stacked neatly, but the floor under his desk creaked oddly when I stepped on it. I knelt down. The wood was loose, just slightly. I pried it up and found a small metal box taped beneath the floorboards. Inside was a burner phone, a folded map, and a single piece of paper. The paper had a name scrawled on it, Marcus Kellen. MK. I turned the burner phone on. It had only one number saved under contacts, Claire. My heart raced. I checked the messages. Most were short, coded. Daniel, we move at dawn. Claire, understood. Daniel, she suspects nothing. And the last one sent a week before the funeral made my stomach drop. Claire, it's done. Julia will believe everything. I drove back home that evening, my mind spinning. Claire and Daniel both alive, both conspiring, and both thinking I was the fool in their story. But now I had the evidence. I wasn't sure whether to go to the police. What would I even tell them? That my dead husband texted me? That his lover broke into my house? They'd think I'd lost my mind, so instead I decided to set my own trap. I sent a message from the burner phone to Claire's number, me pretending to be Daniel, need to meet, same place, urgent. It took her exactly 3 minutes to reply. Claire, you said it wasn't safe. Me, changed my mind, need to talk face to face. 8 p.m., don't be late. I chose the place carefully, an abandoned rest stop just off Ridgewood Highway, the same stretch where Daniel's car had supposedly gone off the bridge. I arrived early, parking my car behind a cluster of trees. The night was cold and quiet, the wind rustling through tall grass. At 8:07, Claire's car pulled in. Headlights swept across the cracked pavement before she turned them off. She got out, clutching her coat, looking around nervously. I stayed hidden, my heart pounding. "Daniel?" she called softly. "Are you here?" She waited. Then her phone buzzed the burner I'd texted from. She glanced at it, frowning. "Daniel?" she called again, louder this time. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. "Looking for someone?" She spun around, eyes wide. "Julia! What the hell are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," I said, holding up the burner phone. "Recognize this?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. "Daniel's been messaging you, hasn't he?" I said. "You've been helping him. He's alive and you knew it." She shook her head, backing away slightly. "You don't understand. It's complicated. Make me understand." She swallowed hard. "He came to me the night before the crash, said he'd gotten in too deep. He needed to disappear, and he wanted my help. He said he was doing it to protect you, that these people would come after the family if he didn't vanish." I studied her face. "So you helped him fake his death?" She didn't deny it. He said once things settled, he'd come back. But then, I stopped hearing from him. "I swear, Julia, I thought he was gone for real. You expect me to believe that?" "I have proof," she said quickly. "Meet me tomorrow morning. I'll show you everything, the money, the fake IDs, the passports. I didn't want any part of it." "Why should I trust you now?" She hesitated. "Because someone's watching you." The way she said it made my blood run cold. "What do you mean?" She looked over her shoulder. "I can't talk here. They might be listening." And then, before I could ask another question, a car engine roared to life somewhere behind us. Headlights flared. A black SUV sped out of the darkness, tires screeching as it tore toward us. "Get down!" Claire shouted. We dove behind her car just as the SUV raced past, its windows tinted. It didn't stop, just circled once and vanished back into the night. We stayed crouched there, hearts hammering. When I looked at her again, her face was pale as paper. "You see," she whispered, "this isn't just about us. It's bigger than you think." That night, as I drove home, her words echoed in my head. If Daniel really was alive, maybe he hadn't meant to hurt me. Maybe he'd been running from something darker. But if that was true, why had he written, "Trust no one"? And why, deep in my gut, did I feel like I was next? I don't remember driving home that night. Only the flicker of streetlights sliding across the windshield like ghosts of a life that no longer existed. When I finally pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same: the neat hedges, the porch light I'd left on, the curtains drawn just as I'd left them. But something about the silence felt different, heavy, expectant. I sat in the car for a long time before going inside. My fingers were still trembling from the encounter at the rest stop. The smell of the house lavender cleaner and burnt candle wax made me nauseous. I locked the door behind me and checked it twice. Then, for the first time since the funeral, I allowed myself to cry. Not the quiet, polite tears you shed when people are watching, the kind that tear through you, shaking everything loose. When it finally stopped, I realized something chilling. I wasn't crying for Daniel anymore. I was crying because I didn't know who to grieve for. The man in the coffin, the man who'd lied to me, or the man who might still be out there hiding in the shadows. I went upstairs, but sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Once I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I looked, nothing, just the pale stretch of carpet and the ticking of the old clock. The next morning, I found muddy footprints near the back door. Small, careful ones. They didn't match my shoes. I checked the lock. It was intact. Still, I changed it that afternoon. When Sophie called, I almost told her everything about Claire, the message, the recordings. But when I heard her voice, full of worry and love, something in me hesitated. What if she thought I was losing my mind? What if she was already part of it? The thought was absurd, and yet it clung to me. That night, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with Daniel's phone again. I replayed his last voicemail, the one from a week before the accident. "Hey, Jules," he'd said, voice tired but warm. "Don't wait up tonight. Big meeting. Love you." That simple love you used to make my heart ache with affection. Now it felt rehearsed, like a line from a script he'd already decided to abandon. I stared at the wall until dawn. 2 days later, Matthew came over unannounced. He'd been quiet since the funeral, too quiet. "Hey, Mom," he said, setting a grocery bag on the counter. "You weren't answering your phone." I forced a smile. I just needed some quiet. He looked around, his eyes scanning the kitchen like he was cataloging the mess, the untouched dishes, the half-drunk cup of tea. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He studied me, then reached for Daniel's old phone on the table. "Why do you still keep this thing around? Doesn't it hurt to see it?" I grabbed it from his hand before I could think. "Don't touch that." He blinked, taken aback. "Mom, I didn't mean I said don't touch it." My voice cracked on the last word. The air between us went still. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm sorry." After he left, guilt twisted in my stomach, but under the guilt, something else: suspicion. How had he known the phone was still active? I'd never told him. That night, I checked the call history again. 2 missed calls from an unknown number, both made just after midnight. I tried calling it back, but it didn't connect. Just a hollow tone and silence. When I turned off the light, I noticed a faint glow from under the front door, a car idling across the street. Its headlights were off, but I could see the faint red flicker of brake lights through the curtains. It stayed there for almost 20 minutes before finally pulling away. The next morning, I found an envelope on the porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with 5 words, printed in block letters. "Stop digging or you'll join him." My hands went cold. I looked up and down the street, nothing. Just the quiet hum of a normal neighborhood, pretending not to notice. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? Later that day, I went to Claire's house. The front door was ajar. Inside, the air smelled faintly metallic, like rust and old blood. "Claire?" I called softly. No answer. Her living room looked untouched, except for a shattered glass on the floor. In the kitchen, her phone lay on the counter, buzzing with missed calls. The last text she'd received was from an unknown number, the same one that had called Daniel's phone. It read, "You talked. Big mistake." I backed out of the house slowly, heart hammering. By the time I reached my car, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the keys. At home, I locked every door and window. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, clutching the flash drive like a towel. "Isman." Daniel's voice echoed in my head again. "Trust no one." But what did that even mean now? No one, not even my own children? Not Claire, not the police, not the world that kept spinning as if mine hadn't cracked open? I thought about calling Sophie, about confessing everything, but when I picked up the phone, I froze, because there was already a message waiting on the screen, from Daniel's number. "Julia," it said, "you weren't supposed to find the drive." My breath stopped. Another message appeared seconds later. "Now they know you have it." The phone slipped from my hand. I stared at the screen, waiting for more. But nothing came, just that hollow dread blooming inside me. Outside, a car engine started. I crawled to the window and peeked through the blinds, parked across the street the same black SUV, and in the faint reflection of the glass, I swore I saw movement behind me. I didn't tell anyone about the note I found under the flower pot that morning. It was short, only 4 words scrawled in Daniel's handwriting I'd know anywhere, they know. "Trust no one." I stared at it until the ink bled into my vision. It was trembling, uneven, like it had been written in haste or fear. For hours, I couldn't move. Every sound in the house felt louder, the clock ticking, the kettle whistling, my own breath shallow and jagged. When I finally stepped outside, the world looked the same, yet everything felt different. I walked through town, my eyes searching faces. I thought I knew the florist who had arranged Daniel's funeral bouquet, the postman who'd offered condolences, even my neighbor Linda who brought casseroles every other night. Every smile looked staged now. Every word felt rehearsed. That afternoon, I went to the police station. The same officer who'd handled Daniel's case, Sergeant Reeves, sat across from me with his polite, tired smile. I told him about the texts, the handwriting, the possibility Daniel might still be alive. He listened, but I could see disbelief flicker behind his eyes before he even opened his mouth. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said gently, "we went over every possibility. The car crash, the records, the DNA confirmation, all consistent. I think you're under a lot of stress. Sometimes grief plays tricks on us." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and thanked him for his time. When I got back home, Sophie was sitting in the kitchen. She looked pale, her phone clutched in her hand. "Mom," she said quietly, "why did you tell the police Dad might be alive?" I froze. "How do you know that?" I asked. Her eyes darted away. "They called. They were concerned." Her tone was strange, not worried, not loving, but careful. Like she was walking a line between belief and suspicion. I wanted to hold her, to tell her everything, but something in her posture, that stiffness, the way she avoided my gaze, made me stop. "I just had to be sure," I said instead. She nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "Mom," she whispered, "maybe you need help, real help." That night, I cried silently in my room. The walls felt closer, the shadows deeper. The house, once warm with family laughter, now felt like a cage. The next morning I decided to stop relying on anyone else. I found Daniel's old laptop in the attic, wrapped in an old sweater. It still worked, barely. The wallpaper was a photo of the 2 of us from a vacation years ago, me squinting against the sun, his arm around my shoulder, both of us pretending everything was fine. I started digging. Emails, bank statements, message threads. Most of it was ordinary bills, business notes, appointments. But then I saw something odd, a folder buried deep under layers of encrypted names. Inside were scanned documents and photographs. Some were receipts for properties I didn't know existed. Offshore accounts, meetings with names I'd never heard. One file stood out. It was dated a month before his supposed death. The subject line read, "If anything happens to me, she'll know." My blood ran cold. The attachment was a single video clip. My hand trembled as I clicked play. The screen flickered, and there he was, Daniel alive, his face drawn, his eyes darting toward the camera like he was afraid someone was watching. "Julia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "if you're seeing this, it means I failed. They're not who they seem. Don't trust anyone, not Reeves, not Sophie, not even—" He hesitated. "I'll explain everything soon. Just stay alive." The video ended abruptly. For a long time I sat frozen. My hands were cold, my breath shallow. Then the tears came not from sadness this time, but from something sharper, betrayal, terror. I replayed it again and again, searching his tone, his eyes, his meaning. What did he mean by not even Sophie? The next few days blurred together. I started noticing things, phone calls that stopped when I answered, cars parked too long near the house, Sophie whispering into her phone late at night. One evening I followed her. She drove out of town to a dimly lit parking lot behind a cafe. I stayed far enough to not be seen. She got out, met someone, a man I didn't recognize. They talked quickly, her body language tense, the man's movements sharp. Then he handed her a small envelope. When she turned and I caught a glimpse of her face under the streetlight, my heart broke. My daughter looked afraid, but also complicit. That night when she returned home, I pretended to be asleep. I listened to her footsteps creak down the hall, to the sound of her door closing softly. And then, silence. I lay there, staring into the dark, the words from Daniel's message looping in my mind, "Trust no one." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the stars fade into gray dawn, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that no longer made sense. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to run or hide or doubt myself anymore. I was going to find the truth, even if it destroyed what little I had left. Sophie came down to the kitchen at sunrise, her hair messy, eyes swollen from sleep. She looked startled to see me sitting there, a cup of cold coffee untouched in front of me. "Mom," she said softly, "you're up early." I motioned for her to sit. "We need to talk." She hesitated but obeyed, sitting across from me. I could see the pulse in her throat, the slight tremor in her fingers. "I know about the video," I said quietly, "the one your father recorded before he disappeared." Her eyes widened just for a second, then she looked down. "You weren't supposed to see that." "Weren't supposed to?" My voice cracked, but I kept it low. "Sophie, what's going on? Where is he? Who are you talking to at night?" She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally she said, "It's not what you think, Mom. Then tell me what it is." Tears welled in her eyes. "Dad wasn't who you thought he was." The words hit like ice water. "What are you talking about?" She rubbed her temples, shaking her head. "He was working for people, dangerous people. He thought he could fix things, but it got out of hand. When he realized they were watching him, he tried to disappear. He told me not to tell you." I stared at her, my heart twisting painfully. "He told you?" She nodded, shame flooding her face. "A few weeks before the funeral, he came to me. He said he was in trouble, that you were in danger if anyone knew he was alive. He made me promise to help cover it up." "Cover it up?" My voice shook now. "Sophie, you let me bury him. You watched me fall apart." She started crying, her shoulders trembling. "I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. He said if you believed he was dead, they'd stop watching you." I stood, feeling lightheaded, like the floor had tilted beneath me. "You should have trusted me." "I couldn't," she whispered. "He told me not to. He said they'd hurt you if I said a word." For a moment, all I could do was stare at her. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had been carrying this secret while I drowned in grief. I turned away, gripping the edge of the counter to Stia. Die myself. "So he's alive," I murmured. "Where is he now?" She hesitated. "I don't know. He stopped contacting me 2 months ago." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with all the words we hadn't said. Finally, I took a deep breath. "We're going to find him." Sophie looked up, startled. "Mom, I've spent too long being afraid," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If he's alive, I need to see him. If he's gone, I deserve the truth. No more lies." She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. We spent the next few days digging together, retracing every account, every name, every place mentioned in the files. It was like walking through Daniel's shadow. Each discovery revealed another layer of deception: business partners who'd vanished, phone numbers disconnected, emails wiped clean. Finally, one lead stood out: a storage unit registered under an alias Daniel had used for years. We drove there in silence, the air thick with tension and unspoken fear. The unit was small, dusty, filled with boxes and old furniture. At first it looked ordinary. Then I saw a metal case tucked beneath the blanket. Inside were documents, photos, and a small envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single letter, Daniel's handwriting again, careful and deliberate this time. "Julia, if you're reading this, then Sophie told you everything. I'm sorry for what I've done, for leaving you to grieve me while I hid like a coward. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I was being hunted, and I couldn't protect you from the truth. The people I worked for would have used you to get to me. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Don't look for me, just live, please. Tell Sophie she did what I asked. She saved you. Forgive me if you can." I sank to the floor, the letter shaking in my hands. Sophie knelt beside me, sobbing. We stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter, bound by grief and truth, neither of us the same as before. Later, when we left the storage unit, the sunlight hit my face, warm and blinding. For the first time in months, I felt something loosen inside me. I didn't know where Daniel was, or if I'd ever see him again. But I knew this: I wasn't the same woman who had stood weeping at his funeral. He had lied to me, yes, but I had survived his absence, his deceit, and the weight of his secrets. And somehow that survival felt like its own kind of justice. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the stars return. Sophie came to sit beside me quietly, her head resting on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. I took her hand. "So am I. But we'll be okay." For the first time, I meant it. When I look back on everything that happened, I sometimes wonder whether the truth always sets us free, or whether it simply changes the kind of prison we live in. I buried a man who wasn't dead. I mourned a marriage that was built on secrets. And I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most aren't villains. They're just scared, fragile souls trying to survive their own mistakes. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It still doesn't. But I learned that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about refusing to let pain be the only story we tell. These days, when I sit by that same window where I once cried through the nights, I whisper a quiet prayer for Daniel wherever he is. Not for him to come back, but for him to finally be at peace. And as for me, I'm learning to live again. To smile without waiting for something to break, to trust even if only a little, because maybe that's what survival really means: learning to breathe, even after the truth has taken your breath away. Tell me, if you were in my place, if the person you loved most lied to protect you, would you forgive them? Let me know in the comments. And remember, every story hides a lesson. Sometimes the hardest truths lead us back to ourselves. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like mine. Until next time, take care of your heart.